I'm going to try to do this video in one long rant. So what irritates me about politics, and the reason that I never do videos on politics and never really get involved in it, is that there's no legitimate opposition in this country. The few independent candidates either don't seem to understand or are sold out behind the scenes, and they fall right into the establishment paradigm of creating divisions. We all know that the establishment tries to govern by creating divisions among any opposition group and always getting people fighting among themselves. And yet you would think that the few apparently independent candidates would not fall into that trap. And yet, what do? They spend most of their time going on mainstream media, debating someone that the mainstream media sets up to talk about minor points and divisiveness. The mainstream media loves debates because debates are all about divisiveness. You would think that the few apparently independent candidates would get together and try to form consensus on the things that they can agree on. Because right now, all the opposition groups are too small to independently make any real progress. If they got together, though, they might be able to come up with a common platform that would focus the issues. Because one individual can always be demonized in the mainstream press. They'll find something from their past, or they'll find someone that they associated with, or they'll just make up some crazy audio like they did with Howard Dean and play it again and again and infer that the person is crazy. And in other countries, if the opposition ever gets strong enough, they can simply get rid of one person. But a message can't really be destroyed in those ways. If people in the opposition really wanted to do anything and had the ability to govern, you would think that they would come together and try to form consensus on issues. And until they can do that, they're really irrelevant. And most Americans should just spend their time figuring out how to extract themselves from any control that the government has over them. Because the government, for the people who are paying attention, I think we see that it's ruled by a small clique of oligarchs, and the really big decisions where the really big money gets spent is made by this small clique, and it's not the 1%, it's the 100th of 1% at the most. And the opposition is just ineffective. You would think that, Ron Paul one day might call up Dennis Kucinich or Bernie Sanders and say, hey, why don't we have, instead of a debate, a discussion on common goals and common proposed laws. I think that you could find people in the Communist Party and the Libertarian Party and the Green Party who all agreed on various laws related to regulating the banking industry, campaign finance reform, tax reform, why the individuals in America are always paying more tax than the corporations, why there isn't a graduated tax for corporations. I mean, there are countless areas of agreement where most Americans would agree with these people also. But until they form a common platform, until they can actually even talk to one another, nothing's going to get done. And you would think that the alternative press, the alternative media, would occasionally invite people to sit down and discuss commonalities instead of debating, discuss suggestions that everyone can agree on. What does Bernie Sanders think should be done? What does Ralph Nader think should be done? What does Rand Paul think should be done? Until these people can come up with common goals and a common platform, the way that the contract with America did in the past. You may not agree with the contract with America, and it didn't really, in the end, accomplish a huge amount, but at least people were able to sit down together and come up with a common platform. Ideas can't be discounted as easily as an individual. And I don't know why I'm wasting my breath with this video, except that perhaps someone in the alternative media will get the idea to start focusing on discussions among the few politicians who aren't sold out, where the politicians are encouraged to find areas of agreement instead of debate differences. I mean, I can understand why the mainstream media that's owned by the establishment is always focused on debate, because debate is all about divisiveness and where you disagree. But you would think that the alternative media would try to focus a little bit more on discussion of how different groups can work together to format change. Because until these different opposition groups start working together, the 1/100% that does know how to work together, even when they disagree among themselves, they're going to continue running the country because they're the only ones apparently qualified to do so. Politicians and lawyers have a natural bias towards debate and divisiveness, but you have to overcome that in order to govern. And unfortunately, a lot of even well-intentioned independent politicians don't overcome that bias. And you would also think that the opposition groups would come together and start working on common platforms. Just a suggestion, just throwing it out there as someone who did have a long career of forming consensus among very disparate stakeholders. The first thing you do is bring people into the same room, get them talking together, and get them focusing on common goals. No one's ever going to agree on everything. That's the nature of government. But in order to actually govern, you have to focus on common goals. When everyone sits in their corner and doesn't talk among themselves and just focuses on their own differences and becomes more and more dogmatic, nothing gets done. And until that happens, in my opinion, most of politics is just a waste of time, and the rest of us should spend our time focusing on how we can escape control by these corrupt people that are governing us and not count on leadership in the opposition to do anything.